Three. Hello and welcome everyone to the latest and greatest episode of the Richard Watkins podcast. We've got a very special guest with us today. But before we get the proceeding, we have to give a huge shout out to the folks that make this here podcast possible, the Science Policy Action Network. I know science is moving forward at a breakneck pace, but the Science Policy Action Network is here to bridge the gap. If you have questions on AI, the climate crisis, or the pandemic, or public health, or education, feel free to reach out to us. Give us a look at www.span-inc.org. Again, that is span-inc.org. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome everybody to today's episode of the Richard Watkins podcast, where our guest is none other than Alan Buansi. Alan Buansi is a representative, is an American politician. He serves as a Democratic member for the 56th District of North Carolina's House of Representatives. Buansi attended Dartmouth College, where he earned his bachelor's degree in 2009. He then attended the University of North Carolina School of Law, where he earned his Juris Doctorate degree in 2015. Buansi served on Chapel Hill Town Council from 2017 to 2021. In May 2022, Buansi narrowly defeated the Democratic primary, narrowly won the Democratic primary for the 56th District of North Carolina's House of Representatives in a race to succeed retiring Rep. Verla Insco. With Buansi facing no general election challenger, Insco resigned from the legislature before the expiration of her term, allowing Buansi to be appointed to her seat and begin his service in the legislature on June 1st, 2022. Representative Alan Buansi, thank you so much for joining us with us today. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. What an introduction. Thank you.
Well, it's just you. Was there anything that I left out?
No, you included plenty. I'll just add that I'm a proud father of three young kids and married to a great wife and my wife Sarah. I'll just add those things.
I know, listen, I know exactly how it goes. You know, those around us, the family members who we love and cherish, are the reason why we do the work that we do. So just really quickly, how did you make the decision to get into politics as a young child? Did you always know you were going to go into public service? Walk us through that day or that moment when you realized that public service was for you.
Well, thank you for the question. I'm going to start a ways back. Wasn't necessarily thinking about getting to politics as a kid, but I was a big history buff and I read about some great people. I remember there's one summer where I was playing video games. I was about 13 years old. My mom walks to the room and she says, "Son, I'm gonna need you to put down these video games." And so, I put the controller down and she gave me some books to read about Congresswoman Shirley Chisholm, a book to read about Justice Thurgood Marshall, along with some other books about civil rights figures, Civil War figures. And the one thing that I took away from all of that was just amazement at how the people who've come before us, when the odds were so great and so high, um, they thought to fight. And they thought to fight in creative ways. When, for the most part, a lot of Black folks in this country did not have the rights that they were entitled to as citizens. And so that inspired me to want to be a lawyer, to be a civil rights lawyer. Proud to have worked at the UNC Center for Civil Rights. But, later on, really kind of, I guess, I got more directly inspired to run for office. I remember this was coming off the heels of the 2016 campaign in which I had worked on Attorney General Josh Stein. Then he was a state senator, Josh Stein. He was running the first time for Attorney General from North Carolina. But I was his policy and field director. And I remember seeing the results of the election and being disappointed in the level of turnout among young people between ages 18 and 25. And so, I thought about how we can get more young people engaged with politics, get folks more knowing about how government at all three levels can affect their daily lives. And so in the spring of, what was it, 2017, I decided to run for Chapel Hill Town Council. I'd grown up in Chapel Hill, loved this community with all my heart. And we've got the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill that has a lot of young people, along with, of course, with our high schools. But I thought, well, local government, it's a level of government that's close to the people. People can actually go to their local town council meetings. They can talk to the town council members and actually see and affect change in a very tangible way. And so at that point in time, I decided, why not run for public office and see what I can do to try to, draw more young people into government and help build a pipeline for folks.
Wow, Representative Buansi, I have to ask, and this is just out of ignorance, and I know if I'm ignorant, maybe somebody in the audience will be enlightened as well. But what exactly is a civil rights attorney?
Great question. So, civil rights means a number of things to I know a number of people, but in the context of the work I did, it was really in the context of environmental justice, in the context of education, in the context of election law as well. But the kind of through line through all of those areas of law is where a group of people are being discriminated against because of their race, because of their sex, or because of some other identifying quality about them that kind of implicates the historical treatment of that certain group of people. And so during my time at the UNC Center for Civil Rights, I was mainly representing and helping and advocating for communities that have been impacted by a variety of things, such as schools that have been underfunded due to some decisions about how funding allocation is kind of spread among school districts. I've represented and advocated for groups of parents, especially of African American children who have been shut out of opportunity because of things like, disparate funding. In the environmental justice context, I have advocated for communities, especially in the eastern part of North Carolina, that have been disproportionately impacted by solid hazardous waste facilities, as well as confined animal feeding operations. And so it, civil rights work, I mean, it covers a lot of different areas of law, but the common thread is that it involves a certain group of people being discriminated against because of who they are.
Again, we have with us Representative Alan Buansi for North Carolina, representing the 56th district of North Carolina. I believe I got that right.
Yeah.
So the UNC Center for Civil Rights, how long has that center been around, and what kind of work do they do? I know that you touched on it a little bit. We're talking about education and so on and so forth, but uh, tell the people exactly what the center does. Yeah, and a little bit of history, if you would.
Yeah, absolutely. So the center got started back in 2001. At that time, Professor G. Nickel was the dean of the law school at UNC Chapel Hill. And then he recruited Mr. Julius Chambers, who by that time was a famed civil rights lawyer. I mean, I can't say enough about the work that he did, not just for folks in North Carolina, but for folks around the country. He was actually director of counsel at one point in time of the NAACP Legal Defense Funds. But anyways, Professor Nickel or Dean Nickel at the time, he helped to recruit Mr. Chambers to spearhead a new Center for Civil Rights, the mission of which would be to advocate for groups of folks around the state who'd been discriminated against. And so from 2001 to present day, Center has been in existence. Now I believe it was 2017, actually the same year in which I ran for Chapel Hill Town Council. Unfortunately, at that time, the UNC Board of Governors made the decision to take away the center's ability to litigate. Some of the stated reasoning at that time was that the center was fostering one way of thinking without being open to other ways of thinking. And, there was really an outpouring of support for the center from all around the state. I mean, we had former clients, there were uh, people who had just kind of grown to know about the work of the Center for Civil Rights, especially in the education context, who'd heard about the center. I mean, there were conservatives, progressives, moderates who came out in strong support of the Center for Civil Rights, as well as law school students and interns. But despite all of that outpouring of support, the decision was made to take away the center's ability to litigate, and what that basically meant was that the center could not file lawsuits on behalf of communities that have been impacted. The center couldn't engage in legal work. And the center still exists, of course, but it's now uh, you know, kind of leaning more on the research side of things. And Professor Ted Shaw, he is the director of the Center for Civil Rights, and he's continuing to do work with the center to the best of its ability. But certainly, not having the center be able to litigate, not only deprives our students of opportunities to learn how to be effective lawyers, but also deprives a lot of communities around North Carolina of badly needed legal assistance to try to get the fair treatment that they so much deserve.
You use some terms there that I hear all the time, and I just want to know from your experience, your opinion. When you get out there, you've run for, municipal government, and now you serve in state government. When you go out there and you're talking to constituents, when you're talking to potential voters, how are they defining the terms conservative, moderate, progressive, right? Because I'm imagining that means different things to different people. But when
Absolutely.
you're on the ground, when you're pressing the flesh, kissing babies, and so hopefully, I don't know how many babies are being kissed right now. COVID's on the uptick,
I,
but
I try not to. Just my own babies.
yeah, just give them a peace sign. But yeah, what are you hearing in terms of how people are defining themselves and what those three terms mean to them?
Great question. This is America, and one great thing about our country is that everybody has their own definitions and opinions about what certain things mean. And certainly, uh, if we ever were to agree on a term like what moderate means in North Carolina, it would be different than what, say, Virginia or some other state defines as moderate. But what I would say in terms of the kind of definitions I operate with, of the terms, I think about historically what progressive has meant. It's I think tended to mean liberal, which encompasses some ideas around the role of government. And I think on the conservative side, that also implicates what the role of government is. I think on the more conservative side, government is something that's a bit more limited in terms of what it does for people, in terms of the kind of services it offers people. Whereas progressive, they may view that a bit more expansively in terms of government being able to and should um, being be able to provide things like robust education, healthcare, things of that sort. But it's definitely all on a spectrum, and certainly not all maybe self-identified progressives think alike. And the same, of course, can be said for conservatives as well, where say progressive, leading person might say that well, I really care about education. I really care about making sure that our schools are publicly funded. I think you could probably find conservatives that may very well say the same thing. And so just I'd say it depends on maybe what some of those kind of hot button topics are or opinions, you know, whether it comes to role of government, whether it comes to certain rights like abortion access or even voting rights. I think you can make certain conclusions about how people might lean depending on what their views are in those kind of hot button areas. But certainly when it comes to moderates, it's that's maybe an even kind of greater, more diverse field of voters. I think I saw something, and I know party affiliation doesn't necessarily coincide with political ideology, but I saw recently that unaffiliated independents, that is, I believe, maybe the top kind of category of voters in North Carolina, if not almost at the top. I know out of the two parties, Democrats and Republicans, there are more registered Democrats than there are registered Republicans, but that unaffiliated group is getting bigger and bigger. And I suspect it's because people don't necessarily want to be boxed in into one way of thinking or into one kind of ideology. So the challenges of our times are making sure that we're doing everything we can, or I should say for myself first, making sure I'm doing everything I can to connect with every single voter, especially in my districts, whether they're Republican, whether they're conservative, whether they're moderate, whether they're progressive, whether they're Democrat or something else. Every voter matters. And, I always maintain an open door to anyone who wants to engage on the issues. If we happen to disagree, that's okay. I still want to work with you. And so that's the attitude that we all have to have in public office.
So when you were getting, into politics and public service, you came into it with kind of your own ideas, which, I want to hear about here in a second, but I've got a different question. You came into it with your own ideas of how you wanted to contribute to society, how you wanted to work and serve society. But when you started campaigning for, let's say, city council, when you started campaigning for city council and you started talking to voters, was there something that caught you off guard? Like you thought you knew exactly what you were supposed to be doing, but you started hearing things that surprised you from potential voters. What was that thing? You're like, everybody cares about this. But then when you started talking to voters, they were like, listen, we want more bike lanes, or we want, like, I have no idea, but what was it that really kind of caught you off guard that you were hearing from voters that perhaps you didn't know you were going to hear entering into public service?
Uh, that's a good question. That's a good question. I mean, certainly going into my service on the Chapel Town Council, when we were on the campaign trail in 2017, had heard a lot from voters about their concerns about the environment, their concerns about transportation, especially concerns about housing. I'd say one area I was a little surprised to hear from a certain segment of folks was on um, what was it? Cell towers and and you know there's I guess there's some folks who think that the proliferation of cell towers is a bad thing and is not healthy for people. So that was something I was a bit surprised to hear from again certain number of folks on just that they're passionate about cell towers and not wanting any in the community and feeling like these things have some bad health effects on folks.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. Wow. Yeah. Like I remember when I was running for office, I would always think, I've got all these topics covered. And then out of left field, you get hit with a topic and you're like, what? I wasn't even thinking about that. I constantly got that and forgive me, you might remember better than I do, but like Havana sickness, or being exposed to microwave
Mhm.
radiation, and I had so many people, whether they would come to an event or they would get my number and they would want to talk to me about this.
Gotcha.
It was crazy, and so I'm always just interested because people are so different and their expectations of what a public servant is going to provide them is just always diverse. And so even though those things caught me off guard, I just very much enjoyed just hearing what people had on their mind,
Yeah.
especially if I wasn't already thinking it. It was just really,
Mhm.
really great. But speaking of like coming into it, wanting to really address things, when you entered into city council, but what were like three major things that you were campaigning on, and how did you decide on picking those things?
Yeah, well, the vision that I've always had in running for office, it's a vision for first our community of Chapel Hill, but also for our state to have a state and a community that is affordable, accessible, and inclusive. Meaning that you know the purpose of the work that I do is to empower as many people as possible to have a fair adequate opportunity to succeed in life, to provide for themselves, to provide for their families. And so kind of more specifically, in terms of the campaign back in 2017, I talked a lot about the importance of making sure that affordable housing is a priority in terms of not just talking about it, but also priority in terms of our budget, making sure that we are reflecting the importance of affordable housing with the dollars that we decide to allocate, annually. Another area of great importance for me is around our environment and doing everything that we can to mitigate climate change in our community, in our state. I mean, it's no secret to anyone how vulnerable North Carolina has been over the past decade plus to hurricanes and other, severe storm events. The reality is that, our planet, our community, our environment is getting hotter. And what that means is more intense storms for North Carolina. And so for the people who are in low-lying areas, not just in our community, but in, close to the coast, and the coastal plain of North Carolina, we need to be taking steps to make sure that they are building and maintaining resilient communities, that we are affording them every resource that we are able to muster to make sure that, they can stay in their homes and that they can stay in an environment that's safe for them and their children. So, climate change, mitigating climate change, that was the second part of things. And then I'd say the third part of my campaign and priority was around, uh, did I say housing? I said that, okay, sorry. So yeah, housing, climate change, but then also transportation. Um, you know, Chapel Hill Transit is a crown jewel of our community, being able to provide fare-free bus service to everyone in our community is something that enables folks to get to work, to get to school in an inexpensive fashion. But it takes a lot to maintain that system. And we also, in the meantime, need to be investing in other ways for people to get around. Want to make it as safe as possible for people to walk, to bike, and that means investing in sidewalks. That means investing in bike lanes, and so that was certainly another big priority I had when I ran as well. And that's not to say that those three, were the most important priorities for Chapel Hill, because there are other important ones, but those are three that I focused on for the most part during my campaign.
Well, yeah, also a huge shout out for Chapel Hill Transit. I rode the J line and the JFX. There are wonderful lines out there, but those are my favorite because those are the ones I rode.
Gotcha.
So shout out to the bus drivers out there getting people
Yep.
to their destination safely. But have those topics or have those issues evolved as you've gone from municipal service to state service? Have they stayed the same? And if they've changed, how have they changed? And how does your new position impact how you think about these issues?
Yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't say that they've changed so much as the scale. The scale is different because, obviously working in state house, I mean, you're not just looking out for your own districts. You're trying to look out for all the people of North Carolina. Um, But in terms of the scale, seeing just the disparate access that folks have to housing across our different communities, the disparate access to transportation, the disparate access to a clean environment and a climate resilient environment. Just learning a lot about what folks say close to the coast are dealing with. That's different than what folks in our own community are dealing with, and different than what our North Carolinians in the mountains are concerned about. And I'd say one of the most interesting things about serving in State House has been um, the emails and correspondence that I get, not just from folks within our district, but from folks in other parts around the state, and hearing about what their concerns are. I mean, some of them are similar to folks in our district, but some of them are different. To hear folks talk about infrastructure and how they've got kids, or they've got family members who are going to schools where the ceiling is falling in on kids as instruction is going on, or where you've got asbestos in a number of schools, in a given school system, making a pretty unsafe environment for their kids, and for teachers, and for staff, and for administrators. Um, Hearing about the flooding problems that a smaller community out east has. You know, People, I think, realize for the most part that the state is in a position to do something about these issues that folks face on a daily basis. And so, the mix of one, wanting the state to do something about it, but then two, frustration, especially from folks who have reached out time and time again out to their General Assembly members, and who hear nothing back from them, or who don't see action from their General Assembly members to respond to those kind of daily challenges that folks have. It's been pretty humbling. And one thing that I see that's always required of me, and should be required of anyone who serves in this capacity, is one, the ability to not just listen, but to be responsive to people, and to, as my old football coach would say, control what you can control. It's no secret that I'm in the minority party, so we're not in a position to make a whole lot of change, but I can certainly do something about our constituent services, and trying to connect people with resources that may lie in any one of our state agencies that can help individuals, or even that can help some communities at some level, in terms of being more climate resilient, or being more housing secure. And so just there's never ongoing challenge of being creative, and how to help people, and being responsive to people that are, on the one hand, really enjoy about the work, but two, I also see so much more that can be done to help people. And That's where elections come into play.
Actually, I didn't know you played football. What position did you play?
Receiver. I believe same
What?
position as you. Yep,
Did we talk about
yep.
this? I didn't know we talked.
No, I,
What?
I think I heard you talk about it during one of your speeches, but we never actually talked about it.
Oh man, that is the greatest position ever. Yeah, that's
Hey,
what's up.
we're on an island. So we're on an island by ourselves. We gotta cope out there.
That's right. That's right. But you're still part of the team, right? This
True.
playing team sports, impact the way you view, politics. Because when you're on the General Assembly, I mean, you're kind of on an island, your district island, but you're working on a team of colleagues. Can you talk about like how playing team sports may have influence? I've never thought of this question before, so forgive me
Yeah.
if it's coming out raw and not put
No,
together.
no.
But has
Great
that
question.
influenced the way you approach serving on the legislature?
Absolutely. No doubt. I started playing team sports, when I was a little kid, 6, 7 years old, playing basketball, and then, later on playing soccer, and then in high school, doing track. Did a little bit of football in high school, but really did my football in college, and was very blessed and thankful to make it onto the team. But but yeah, I mean, a team is a collection of personalities. It's a collection of people who've got differing views on a number of different subjects. I can remember back when I was in college, I had a locker right across from a teammate who at one point kind of sparked up a conversation about race. This particular teammate had grown up in New England, hadn't really spent much time outside there, but I think he made a comment along the lines of, Alan, wouldn't you say that that racism doesn't exist in the North? But it's definitely something that's a Southern thing. And now I can remember I had a teammate who was right beside me who was from Birmingham, Alabama. And both of us kind of did that slow, like, what? But we had a really spirited, conversation about it. What wasn't an argument by any means, and appreciated the teammate that raised that initiated the conversation. I mean, he definitely learned some things. And he learned that something like racism, I mean, it's everywhere, and it doesn't matter if you're in the state of Maine or in the state of Alabama. It's there. None of us, in terms of our society, are immune from it. We all have to work at it. We all have to work to make sure that we are bringing each other up in a world in which we can, of course, acknowledge our differences, but also not treat people differently because of our differences. And so, yeah, I mean, and one reason I guess why I chose to go to college where I did was because kind of culturally speaking, there were many more conservative thinking people there than who were in my high school or in my particular friend group, and I wanted to be around folks who thought differently than me. I want to be challenged in the ways that I think, and also sharpen the ways that I think. And so I got that experience much more at Dartmouth, not just because of the students that I came across, but also especially because I played football, and I really appreciated looking back on it, the conversations I had with folks. No doubt we had some frustrating conversations that stirred up a lot of passion, but in the end, I learned how to listen. I learned how to, um, you know, despite what our differences might be politically speaking, I learned, I'm fighting for the next man, not just myself. I'm fighting for the next person. And so, in the context of our country, in the context of our state, we got folks that think very differently on a variety of things. But like I said before, even a district like mine, we've got Republicans too. We've got conservatives too, and they deserve as much a representative who will engage with them, listen to them, as the next person does. And I'm here for them as well.
That's awesome. That is awesome. So again, Representative Alan Buansi from North Carolina's 56th district. Thank you so much for being with us. But before we go, and I, thank you so much for spending time with us. I know you're really busy doing the good work, serving the people of North Carolina and of the 56th district. But I asked this question of all the guests because these interviews are unscripted and I just go with the flow. And so invariably, I miss questions that perhaps the guests are hoping to receive. Maybe there's a critical issue that you want to talk about, something that you want voters to know, just really anything. So I wanted to end with this question. Is there a question that you were hoping that I would ask you that I never got to? And if so, what is that question? And once you ask it, go ahead and answer it.
Yeah, I guess one question that comes to mind is, you know, what what do you think, or what do I think about the state of our democracy in this day and age? We've got a big election year coming up, November. As kind of a precursor to what I'm about to say, I will just encourage every citizen out there to do. I won't say there's civic duty. It should be a civic duty, but to please do your part and vote. And you know, One thing that I say to some folks, when they are particularly passionate about a certain issue that involves a decision that's being made by Congress or being made by General Assembly, um, is and if I know him well enough, I say, uh, did you vote in the last election? And folks, for the most part, have been honest with me. Some folks have said no, they haven't voted. And my response to them is, uh, well, uh, you care about these issues, and you obviously understand that these issues have a lot to do with decision makers who are in these governing bodies. Um, the most important thing that you can do to inform who's in that position and what decision that person's making is to vote. Because when you're not voting, other people are actually making the decision for you. And so I would just encourage people to, take control, take some agency and vote. Um, Now, that all being said, in North Carolina, over the past year or so, year plus that I've been in the General Assembly, I've seen legislation come through and pass that unfortunately is going to have the effect of making it harder for citizens to vote, certain citizens to vote, particularly absentee ballots. There was a law passed last year that eliminated the 3-day grace period that had been in place really through a bipartisan measure, but 3-day grace period that absentee ballots had, to get to the Board of Elections. Basically the rule was previously that as long as you mail your ballot, as long as it's postmarked by election day and it gets there within 3 days afterward, it will be counted. A lot of folks don't realize that, in terms of when ballots are actually counted, it actually happens 9 days after election day. And so that 3-day grace period was designed to ensure to the best extent possible that people who use the mail-in absentee ballots, could get their votes in and have their votes counted. And unfortunately, that 3-day grace period was taken away. There is also another provision of that law that allows for anyone to challenge, as long as they live in the same county, to challenge the absentee ballot of another voter. And given the way that our mail system operates, our postal workers do the very best that they can, but it's well documented that there are challenges with our mail system. There's funding problems. Unfortunately, that has led to delays. And so taking away that 3-day grace period and essentially making all absentee ballots due by the day of election has the real potential to mean that a lot of votes won't be counted, this year, in the event that someone chooses to use an absentee ballot. So I say that all to say that there have been other measures that have been passed over the past decade plus that have also impacted ballot access for citizens. But all that to say is uh, it just makes it even more important that people do everything they can to make sure that they go vote. If they're voter eligible, go vote. And if you need to go vote in person, do that instead of sending in an absentee mail-in ballot. Um, you know, I could say a lot about what the stakes are of these elections. I mean, I've heard from a number of folks, really on, throughout the political spectrum, on public schools. Public schools, these are things that, most of us, the vast majority of us in our state, in our country, have gone through. I know we can recall teachers who we really liked and recall teachers who we didn't like. But at the end of the day, in terms of folks being able to get the kind of job that they have, or folks being able to get the kind of housing that they have, or to move around, we can point to the importance that our schooling, our public schooling has had on each of us, and what's provided us. And so, public schools, I mean, it's one of the bedrocks too of a good democracy. If you've got folks who are, educated to a certain level, you're going to have, folks who are informed in terms of not just voting, but in terms of their own jobs and making a way for themselves and their families. And one thing in North Carolina that I think has been a great disservice to the people, decisions have been made by this General Assembly over the past decade plus to divert public school dollars away to private school taxpayer funded vouchers. And it's meant, unfortunately, that a lot of school systems have been hard hit by what amounts to public school funding cuts. And the hardest hit, I mean, we've got our own school system here, Chapel Hill Carborough City Schools, that's been, greatly impacted by those cuts. But we've also got a lot of school systems in more rural parts of the state, in places around the state where the school system is actually one of the biggest job providers. They've seen these significant cuts to their own budgets, because the General Assembly has made these decisions, and so really want people to vote, but also to know what the stakes are. I mean, public schools are on the ballot. Abortion access is on the ballot. There have been some things that this Republican-led General Assembly has done to further restrict abortion access, and some things, unfortunately, that have been hinted at in terms of further eroding that right of women. But then, when it comes to healthcare, I mean, there's also the fact that North Carolina has one of the highest maternal mortality rates among Black women. That's something that the General Assembly is in a position to do something about, but it depends on who you're voting for. And so, um, if you can think of something that you care about, I can almost guarantee that the General Assembly has something to do with that. And so, just would really encourage, urge, implore on folks the importance of if you're voter eligible, please, please, please take the time to vote. Get registered if you're not registered, but once you're registered, go vote, because your children's lives, your life, really depends on it.
Wow, well said. Thank you so much, Representative Alan Buansi, again from North Carolina's 56th district. And not only thank you for joining us today, because I know your time is precious and valuable, but thank you for your commitment to public service. I know the responsibility that you bear is awesome, to say the least. But thank you for stepping up, making yourself available. Thank you for doing the work of the people. I really, really appreciate it. And you being here is just so very special to me. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Richard. It's an honor to serve, and it's been an honor talking with you today. So I appreciate you for what you're doing, Richard.
Well, it's no problem at all. That is it for our episode of the Richard Watkins podcast. You can catch it right here on YouTube or Facebook. But until next time, you all have a great day. And thank you again, Representative Alan Boynton.
My pleasure. Take care.